Have you ever been escorted off your own land by cops who used to be your friends? One minute, I'm sitting by the fire thinking about my late wife, watching the stars dance over the lake we built together. The next, I'm staring down flashing lights and a woman in designer heels calling me a trespasser. Let me ask you this. What would you do if someone tried to steal your land, not with guns or chains, but with lawyers, lies, and legal loopholes? Because that's exactly what happened to me. And it all started the night my campfire, my little moment of peace, turned into a battlefield. This is the story of how the HOA came for my lake, and how I made sure they'd regret it. Have you ever watched flashing red and blue lights dance across your own lake, your lake, while a woman in heels screamed that you were trespassing? Yeah, that happened to me. It was supposed to be a quiet night. Just me, a six-pack, a half-stale sandwich, and the sound of the fire crackling under the stars. I'd done this 100 times. Same old camping chair. Same spot by the water where Emily and I used to sit and talk about the future. God, I missed her. Been 5 years, but sometimes it still hits like the first night I had to fall asleep without her hand in mine. Anyway, I was halfway through my second beer, thinking about building a dock she'd always wanted, when the sirens came. On my land. Next thing I know, 2 squad cars are pulling up like I'm some kind of drug lord instead of a warehouse manager with bad knees and a love for catfish. And behind them, heels clicking, chin raised like she owns the whole state, comes Patricia Ellison, president of the Crestview Heights HOA. Now before I go any further, hit that like button if you've ever had to deal with a nightmare HOA or know someone who has. And if this story already has your blood pressure rising, go ahead and subscribe. You're gonna want to see how this one plays out. Anyway, Patty points at me like I'm a burglar caught red-handed. "That's him, officer," she says. "He's trespassing on HOA land, disturbing the peace, camping illegally." Can you believe that? Camping on my own property. And here's the kicker, one of those officers used to cut class with me in high school to go fishing. Deputy Brian Walsh. Good guy. He looks at me, then at Patty, then back at me again, like his brain's buffering. "Dan," he says, "I'm gonna need you to pack up for the night, just until we sort this out." I laughed, not because it was funny, because it was so ridiculous that it had to be a joke. But it wasn't. And that's when I knew. This wasn't just about a camping trip. This was war. And Patty? She had a plan. Now, I know what you're thinking. Maybe this was just a misunderstanding, some confused paperwork, a harmless HOA mix-up. Oh, I wish. See, Patty Ellison didn't just think the lake was hers. She wanted it. And people like Patty, they don't ask. They take. The next morning, I found a formal letter taped to my gate. Real fancy envelope, gold trim, HOA logo in the corner like they're the White House. Inside, a cease and desist order, telling me to vacate community-controlled property or face legal action. Community-controlled. I nearly choked on my coffee. This lake's been mine for 10 years. Paid for it with every cent my parents left me and what Emily and I saved up by skipping takeout and fixing leaky faucets ourselves. I've got deeds, tax records, pictures of Emily catching her first fish here. But to Patty, none of that mattered, because in her mind, if it wasn't under the HOA's thumb, it didn't belong. A few days later, I caught her out by the lake, wearing pearls. On ranch land, she was talking to some guy in a suit. Clipboard, Bluetooth earpiece, the whole 9 yards. Looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. When I walked up, Patty turned and gave me this smile like she was posing for a luxury real estate billboard. "Dan," she purred, "I hope you don't mind. We're just surveying the area for future community development. You know, maybe a walking trail, some benches. It'll really raise property values." Raise property values. I paving over my memories? Told her, politely at first, to get off my land, She waved her clipboard guy back like she was dismissing a waiter, then leaned in and said something I'll never forget. "This place doesn't belong to you anymore. You just don't know it yet." Let that sink in. That's when I realized this wasn't just about some HOA power trip. This was personal. Patty had plans, and I wasn't in them. So I did what any reasonable, overworked, emotionally exhausted man who just got threatened by a woman in pearls would do. I went digging. Because if Patty thought she could gaslight me out of my own land, she clearly didn't know who she was messing with. I pulled out every document I'd ever saved. Land deed, title insurance, tax receipts, even Emily's old lakefront sketches. I even requested old town planning maps from the county clerk, back when you had to fax a request and pray someone checked the machine. A few days later, a package arrived. Inside were 3 zoning maps from the early '80s, still smelling like mothballs and moldy basement. That's when I saw it. Faint, scribbled in pencil, right along the border of my lake lot. Shared. Not community, not easement, not HOA act. Just shared. I stared at that one word for hours, and then I did what any normal person would do. I Googled, how legal is a pencil note on a zoning map? Turns out, not very, but in court, it's enough to start a fight. And just when I thought things couldn't get weirder, my phone buzzed. Blocked number. Message read, "Leave the lake or you'll lose more than land." It wasn't signed, but come on, we both know who sent it. The HOA doesn't have thugs. They're the thugs. Suddenly, this wasn't just a legal gray area. It was turning into something darker. Threats? Surveillance? Map manipulation? I knew I couldn't face this alone. And there was only one person in this town who'd seen all of it happen before. Someone older than the HOA. Someone who remembered when this lake wasn't a line item on a budget, but just a quiet place with ducks and cattails. So I drove across town to visit Evelyn Harper, retired librarian, local historian, and proud owner of the world's nosiest porch swing. She opened the door with a look that said, "What took you so long?" and invited me in like she'd already brewed the tea. Her living room smelled like lemon polish and old books, and her filing cabinet was organized better than my life. "Let me guess," she said, not missing a beat. "Patty's trying to take your lake too?" I blinked. "Too?" She nodded, already pulling out a folder. "You're not the first one. You probably won't be the last." She handed me a stack of yellow documents with case numbers, handwritten letters, even a faded newspaper clipping. Names I didn't recognize, properties I vaguely remembered, all had one thing in common. Somehow, each got swept into HOA hands, some through intimidation, others through quiet rezoning, and a few just disappeared off the records entirely. As I flipped through the paperwork, the pieces started falling into place. Patty wasn't just aggressive, she was methodical. There was a blueprint, a pattern, a strategy. The only question now was, who else was in on it? And that is when Evelyn dropped the real bombshell. Evelyn Harper didn't just have stories, she had receipts. Literally. Neatly filed, color-coded, and held together with rubber bands that probably predated the HOA itself. We sat at her dining table, which doubled as a war room. She slid over a faded manila folder like she was handing me a secret FBI file. Inside were copies of everything: court filings, HOA newsletters, old zoning proposals. But what stopped me cold was a photo. It was Patty. Younger, yes, but unmistakable. Standing beside a for sale sign on a property that had never officially been sold. "That's from Nevada," Evelyn said, sipping her tea. She and her husband tried the same stunt there, manipulating deeds, bullying seniors, faking easements. She pointed to a name stamped in one of the documents. Richard Ellison, Patty's husband, real estate lawyer, suspended license. Turns out, they'd run a land grab operation back in Clark County, got caught, lost a massive lawsuit, fined 7 figures, fled the state, reinvented themselves here, Evelyn said. And Patty found a new kingdom, Crestview Heights. It hit me then. This wasn't just HOA drama. This was a pattern, And I wasn't the first victim, just the latest. Evelyn walked me through the Garrison case. A young couple, new baby, owned a strip of land backing onto a public trail. HOA started slow, requests for access, community improvements, better lighting for safety, the usual soft touch. Then came noise complaints, phony citations, sudden spikes in HOA dues, and finally a lien for non-compliance. They tried to fight back, but between the legal fees and the stress, they gave up and moved. Property got absorbed into HOA inventory. Sound familiar? Evelyn asked, raising a brow. I nodded. It was Patty's blueprint, turn pressure into paperwork and paperwork into possession. And the worst part? Most folks didn't even realize they were being manipulated until it was too late. She's using the HOA as a weapon, but there's cracks in her armor, you just have to know where to look. She flipped open another folder. Emails leaked from a disgruntled board member, meeting minutes, and one little nugget that made my stomach flip. HOA funds being used for environmental reclamation projects. Sounded harmless until Evelyn pulled up drone photos of my lake. Timestamped. Taken weeks before I was even accused of trespassing. They've had eyes on you for a while, she said, and they've already drafted plans to rezone your lot. That's when it clicked. The shared label on the map wasn't a mistake. It was a plant. A breadcrumb Patty had placed years ago to justify her eventual takeover. I had just been promoted from obstacle to target. And as if on cue, my phone buzzed again. Another message. You're poking around too much, Dan. Don't make this worse for yourself. I showed Evelyn the screen. She didn't flinch. They're bluffing, she said. Bullies always do. But we've got something they don't. History. And people who remember it. We spent the next 3 hours cataloging everything. Names, dates, photos, legal precedents. And as I left Evelyn's house that night, one thing was clear. If I wanted to take Patty down, I had to stop playing defense. I needed evidence, real, undeniable proof. And there was only one way to get it. Catch 'em in the act. You ever notice how HOA board meetings feel more like mafia sit-downs than community get-togethers? Evelyn called it years ago, said HOAs like Crestview Heights don't govern, they control. Quietly, surgically, like white-collar mob bosses in golf carts. And when I really stepped back and looked at what Patty was doing, it hit me. This wasn't just a power trip, it was a playbook. Everything followed a pattern. Target a property they want, preferably adjacent to a community feature like a lake, trail, or park. Invent complaints. Weeds too tall, fence too short, paint too faded. Bury you in fines, CC&Rs, architectural violations. Will you push back? Drown you in legal fees until you surrender, or go broke trying not to. And when you finally give up, exhausted and in debt, they graciously offer to buy you out. It's not racketeering if it's done with clipboards and bylaws, right? Evelyn handed me a file on the Garrison family. Remember them? She had everything. Their original plat map, photos of their mailbox removed without notice. Violation reports filed on Christmas Eve. A video of Patty literally telling them at a meeting, you can either work with us or work against the neighborhood. That's HOA speak for, we're taking your land, sweetie. The Garrisons ended up moving to Arizona. Their property? Now it's a picnic area with a fake community garden nobody waters. Patty's reach wasn't just local. Through Richard, her lawyer husband with a now suspended license, she'd built a whole web of soft power influence. Real estate agents steering buyers away from non-compliant lots. County clerks who accidentally delayed paperwork. Even code enforcers who somehow only investigated properties on her radar. And now, she had her sights on my lake. I started noticing things. HOA trucks cruising by slowly at night. A guy with a clipboard measuring my fence. Dead catfish floating belly up near the far bank. Coincidence? Maybe. But I've lived long enough to know when I'm being scoped out. And then came the hazmat barrels. I found two, hidden behind brush near the south dock, unmarked, sealed tight. But the ground around them was slick with oil, and the smell, like burnt plastic and acid, had a baby. I didn't touch them. I just took photos. Lots of photos. See, Patty thought she was playing chess, but I'd just flipped the board. I installed cameras, real ones, hidden in birdhouses, behind fence posts, even one inside a hollowed-out garden gnome Emily used to call Captain Blinky. I didn't just want proof of who was coming. I wanted to know what they were doing. And why? Because if they were willing to poison my lake, this wasn't just HOA overreach anymore. This was criminal. And that's exactly what I caught them doing. Installing the cameras wasn't just smart, it was necessary. After what I'd seen with those barrels by the south dock and the HOA trucks creeping by at night like raccoons in khakis, I knew they weren't done. And if they were bold enough to poison my lake once, they'd try again. The decoys I set up were old pawn shop cameras, big, clunky, and obvious. I wanted them to be seen. But the real ones? Those were tucked into hollow fence posts, inside an old birdhouse, even inside this creepy lawn gnome Emily used to call Captain Blinky. They had motion sensors, infrared, cloud backup, everything short of facial recognition. And I made sure they pointed straight at every access point near the lake. 3 nights later, 1:13 a.m. I got the alert. Movement. East fence line. Multiple figures. I grabbed my laptop, pulled up the live feed, and my blood ran cold. 4 people creeping toward the water. Black hoodies, gloves, headlamps. One of them slipped in the mud. Swore loud enough that even the camera mic caught it. And that voice? Todd Brennan, HOA board member, Patty's personal lapdog. But that wasn't even the worst part. Because 30 seconds later she appeared. Patty Ellison. In full black, hair tied back, clipboard in hand, barking quiet orders like some HOA ninja general. Then came the barrel. Blue. Industrial. The kind you'd expect to see behind a sketchy auto shop, not next to a family-friendly neighborhood. They popped it open and started pouring thick, dark sludge straight into the water. I zoomed in. It shimmered in the moonlight, thick as oil, with a rainbow sheen that meant one thing: chemical runoff. I watched frogs leap from the shoreline and not come back up. The water bubbled slightly at the edge. One of them was wearing a Crestview Heights HOA jacket. They weren't just trespassing. They weren't just threatening me. They were committing a crime. On video, in full color, with timestamps, with faces. I didn't panic. I backed it all up. Twice. One USB went under my truck's spare tire, another into my safe. I uploaded a copy to a private drive Evelyn helped me set up, just in case. The next morning I walked into the sheriff's office with a folder thick enough to break a wrist and handed it to Brian Walsh. It looked like hell, like the weight of pretending not to see what Patty was doing had finally cracked him. He hit play on the video, watched the whole thing, didn't blink. "Jesus, Dan," he whispered, I had no idea." And I believed him. He'd been played. Promised promotions, budget boosts, a clean career path, all wrapped in Patty's silk gloves. But now, that silk glove had poison all over it. "This is felony-level stuff," Brian muttered. "Environmental crimes, conspiracy, tampering with private property. I can open a full investigation, immediately." I nodded. "Good, but let me play one more card first." Because I wasn't done, not even close. I went home and wrote the perfect letter. A fake surrender. "Dear Mrs. Ellison, I can't fight anymore. You win. The legal bills, the pressure, it's too much. I'll sign whatever you need. Just please stop ruining what's left of my wife's lake." Then, I added a shaky signature and a fake tear stain for dramatic effect. Evelyn delivered it, playing the part of the worried friend. She handed it to Patty at her mailbox, and that's when the real show began. Pat is believing she'd won, went full peacock. posted about it online, held a little celebration brunch, told the community she had reclaimed the lake for the people. I sat at home, watching the whole thing unfold, and smiled, because little did she know that letter was bait, and she'd just taken the hook, the line, and the HOA-branded sinker. I had walked into a courtroom and feel like the underdog at a gladiator match. Made me my best boots, flannel shirt ironed for once. Evelyn beside me like a 78-year-old general ready for war, and across the aisle, Patty Ellison, head held high, dressed like she was auditioning for Real Housewives, HOA edition. She brought backup, of course. A high-dollar lawyer from Dallas, who looked like he charged by the breath. The guy smiled like he already knew he was going to win. The judge looked like she'd rather be fishing. Till the first piece of evidence hit the screen. We started with the drone footage, the barrels, the dead fish. Then came the camera footage, the midnight trespassing, the sludge pouring, the HOA-branded jacket, Patty barking orders like she was hosting a neighborhood bake sale with acid. You could feel the air shift. Patty's lawyer objected, of course, claimed the footage was deep-faked, heavily edited, out of context, the usual Hail Mary. Then came the testimony. Todd Brennan flipped faster than a pancake on Sunday. He took the stand, pale and sweating, and spilled everything. Yes, Patty ordered it. Yes, she said the lake needed to be unusable. Yes, she threatened to pin it on me if it went south. He even brought audio recordings, one where Patty actually screamed, "I don't care if we have to nuke the fish. That man will sell or drown trying." You could hear a pin drop in that courtroom, if not for Evelyn letting out a quiet like she was in church. Then came the cherry on top, the Nevada files. We submitted them officially into evidence. A history of land grabs, intimidation, and lawsuits Patty lost. The judge read them aloud like she was narrating a true crime podcast. Patty tried to defend herself, took the stand, but her voice shook, snapped at the prosecutor, cried, blamed everyone, me, Todd, the HOA board, even Brian Walsh. "They're all against me," she shrieked. "This is a conspiracy, a smear campaign." Judge wasn't buying it. She leaned forward, voice cold and calm. "I've seen enough. The Crestview Heights HOA is hereby fined $100,000, 0 cents for environmental damage, criminal conspiracy, and harassment." Then she turned to Patty. "And as for you, Ms. Ellison, you are removed from your position effective immediately, and barred from holding any leadership role in any homeowners association in this state, permanently." The courtroom went silent. Then, just as the bailiff moved to escort Patty out, she snapped, tried to swing her purse at Todd, yelled something about betrayal and ruining everything. Todd ducked. The purse hit a bench. Her sunglasses flew off like shrapnel. Honestly, if it wasn't so tragic, it would have been comedy gold. The local news picked it up. Headline: HOA president ejected in courtroom meltdown. Footage of Patty being led away in cuffs became a meme within hours. Someone even edited it to music from the cops. Meanwhile, Crestview Heights residents started coming out of the woodwork, sharing stories, filing complaints. Turns out I wasn't the only one she'd tried to push out, just the loudest. Brian met me in the parking lot after the verdict, handed me a manila envelope. "Thought you might want this," he said. Inside was a newspaper clipping from 7 years ago. Nevada real estate agent loses land fraud case. Photo of Patty, younger, same smirk, standing next to her husband. This had never been about the lake. It had been about control, ego, winning. And now, she'd lost. 3 days after the courtroom showdown, I stood at the edge of my lake again. This time, there were no cops, no thugs, no sludge in the water. Just the sound of ducks splashing and wind brushing through the cottonwoods. For the first time in months, it was quiet, peaceful. The kind of peace that only comes after a long, messy fight. I thought about Emily, about how she always said, "This lake is more than land, it's a promise." I kept that promise. Patty Ellison's empire had crumbled. Her HOA crown was in pieces. Her husband was facing disbarment. And the Crestview Heights Community Center? It now stood on land I owned after purchasing it from the state at auction, fair and square. Why? Because when you want real change, you don't just break the system. You replace it. I called a neighborhood meeting, my first as the new majority landowner. No suits, no intimidation, just neighbors, coffee, and folding chairs. We're done with fear, I said. From now on, this community serves everyone, not just the loudest, not just the richest, everyone. They voted to dissolve the old board that day. And in its place, we created something better, smaller, volunteer-run, and transparent. No hidden bylaws, no secret fines, just folks watching out for each other. Word spread. Emails poured in, messages from towns across the country. Stories like mine, families bullied, homes taken, lakes poisoned. Then one afternoon, a woman knocked on my door. Late 30s, worn-out eyes, hope barely hanging on. I'm from Riverside Township, she said. 2 hours south, our HOA, it's worse than Patty. We heard what you did. Will you help us? She handed me a folder. Photos, statements, court filings. Same tricks, same tactics. Same kind of predator, wearing a different smile. I looked at that lake behind her in the pictures. Murky. Scarred, but still standing. And I remembered something Evelyn told me. History doesn't just record injustice, it warns the next person. I nodded. Yeah, I'll help. Because I wasn't just a warehouse worker anymore. I wasn't just a guy with a beat-up truck and a folding chair. I was the man who beat the HOA queen, and now, maybe I could help others do the same. We organized, launched a small website, shared documents, legal templates, even guides on how to spot the warning signs of HOA abuse. They called it the Carver method. I called it doing the right thing. That spring, we held a barbecue by my lake. Not just a party, but a celebration of something bigger. Families came from 3 counties over. Evelyn made peach cobbler. Kids raced paddle boats. Someone even brought a cake shaped like Patty falling off her HOA throne. And as the sun dipped low over the water, I stood where Emily and I used to sit, same chair, same breeze, and whispered, we did it. Not just for us, but for everyone who thought they had no voice. For every homeowner who got pushed around. For every lake, garden, porch swing, and fence line they tried to take. This land? It's still mine. But now, it's also ours. And nobody, not Patty, not the next HOA tyrant, not even time, will take that away.